Ow, my ears are bleeding. Richie, you want to continue on with that rant that you were going on with?
Yeah, I do actually.
Get into politics and all sorts of stuff not related to trucking today. You went off on a rant there. You might have to save that one up for Safety Valve Friday.
Listen, if you want to do that on Safety Valve Friday, I'll be more than happy to.
I got it. I mean, you had a good point here, and I thought it was interesting that from one of the cable TV shows, this one on MSNBC, the Ed Show, Ed Schultz, a poll yesterday that they did for viewers, and of course, I mean, you got to consider, it's like whether it's left or right, and some will argue that MSNBC is left leaning, and some will argue Fox is right wing leaning. That asking that of your own audience, you're not surprising when you get the points. But it was a stupid question. The worst president was the Romney Ryan ticket. The worst.
Well, you know what? Years. I think it's important that you do the wording correctly because it wasn't. You were watching it. I was. Yeah. The exact question that Ed Schultz posed to his audience was: do you think the Romney Ryan ticket is the most radical, Evan, presidential ticket ever?
Ever? As in, like, since the beginning of the country in 1776 when we declared our independence and George Washington then became our first president? I mean, ever? The whole time?
I don't have a dictionary handy, but yeah, I think if I was going to interpret the word ever, I would think we would go back to the very foundation of this country back with George Washington. So yeah, ever is of all time. So to say that ticket or even suggest it, and fine, the question's fine. Okay, if you want to ask a dumb question, but let me give you the results of that poll, Evan. Yeah. 96% of the people watching the liberal MSNBC, I might add, said that yes, the Romney-Ryan ticket is the most radical presidential ticket ever.
Oh, come on. I mean, come on. I mean, the most radical ever? Give me a break here.
Well, and this was my point. This is what got me so excited. I mean, it's one thing to dislike George W. Bush or dislike Barack Obama. That's fine. But if you're living in this day and age, okay, and you say that pick them, pick any side of the aisle you want, pick any candidate at any level of government that you want, and to say that person is the worst ever, Evan, I got two suggestions. You probably, A, need to pick up a book and read something.
True.
And B, just stop arguing politics in public because you just don't know what you're talking about. And you don't have and to make a statement like that or even to allude to something like that, Evan, you really do not have a historical perspective on government.
And you gave a couple of great examples of two people that were that were obviously radical.
And this was just off the top of my head. Strom Thurmond ran for president in the 60s, and John Breckeniridge ran for president. The year escapes me, but John Breckeniridge ran on a ticket prior to the Civil War. And anybody who's alive today knows that Strom Thurmond was a segregationist.
Right.
And for those, I don't expect everybody to know who John Breckeniridge is, but John Breckeniridge ran on a pro-slavery platform. So let's go back to Ed's question about being most radical. Okay, yes, Paul Ryan wants to cut Medicare. Yeah, it's not, in my opinion, it's not a good idea. Mitt Romney wants to cut various programs. Again, in my opinion, not a good idea. But slavery sounds pretty radical to me.
Yeah. I mean, making the comparison there between Medicare and slavery, I'm sorry, that's like using the Hitler analogy.
Oh well, that again, that's the other thing too. Is if I'm arguing with somebody and you say again, you go back and you say, oh, George W. Bush, and I'm no George W. Bush guy, you know that, and probably half the audience knows that too. But George W. Bush doesn't even crack the top 10 of worst presidents of all time. In fact, there's probably a definitive answer. If you want to go right to the history book and say who is the worst president ever, there probably is a good consensus, and that would probably be William Henry Harrison. And to no fault of his own, William Henry Harrison served 30 days in the White House, and he was in a coma for most of it.
and you've got to be exceptionally bad to be the worst president in history to just serve 30 days.
Again, you serve 30 days, and 27 of it it, you were in a coma in a hospital somewhere. So William Henry Harrison, again, if you want to go right down the line of what worst means, and again, to no fault of his own, William Henry Harrison is the worst president of all time. Now, again, you want to put that in a modern context, you could also argue that the handful of presidents, say 6 to 8 of them, who were prior to the Civil War, Evan, that ignored the expansion of slavery, those guys are automatically ahead of George Bush and Barack Obama.
Yeah, I mean, they suck pretty well too. I mean, it wasn't until we got Lincoln that slavery became an issue, and there was the abolition of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there were presidents and presidential candidates that kicked that can down the road for probably almost 100 years leading into the the eventual Civil War in the 1860s. So to say George W. Bush, all right, listen, you want to say is George W. Bush the worst president of this decade or of this century? Yeah, I'm in.
You would say that, but of all time, obviously a ridiculous statement that was made by Ed Schultz.
Listen, if you think any one of those guys are whether it be George Bush or Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, if you want to say that they are the worst, I have 2 words for you: Millard Fillmore.
Interesting history lesson from there.
Well, thank you. I don't know if it was right, but
but it was a good lesson. Hey, never let the truth get in the way of a good story, as I once heard.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that rant. I enjoyed that.